Good morning. How are you? Well, it's good to be out during the day instead of sort of late in the evening as the golden sun casts its last rays before the shadows overtake the day. And today it's just gorgeous out. The temperature in the Thomas Jefferson weather report is right now about 78, headed toward 80, and the warmth feels really good. And we only have so many days of this before we turn to the wintry time of the year. The colors have all of a sudden burst out. What a difference it is to talk about red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet as the spectrum of nature at this time of the year. And so we measure it in names and visibility, not angstrom units, and it's really quite pleasurable. This time in spring are two of the most magnificent periods of the year for reminding us of the beauty that surrounds us. And of course the storms remind us that Mother Nature has a tough side as well. We are familiar with the crazy news that's going on, I assume, and we spent a lot of time talking about that fellow Robert Card up in Maine. And because we visit Maine at least once a year for the last, 10 years, I feel a kinship to the people, the lack of the density of citizens, the open areas, the water on one side and the mountains on the other. And this fella, he couldn't come to grips with this surrounding. And he spent, they said, half his life in the reserve in Maine. But there was an important incident this past summer. He was saying things that were found to be distressing. And as a result, he was committed for several weeks to inpatient treatment at a hospital. Now, what did they do after that? How did he still have access to weapons? When I was a kid in New York, one of the things that were distressing was that Hugh Carey, who was the governor at the time, he was closing down these mental health institutions. And these people were being turned to the street. And they had the same problems that probably Robert Card had. But we live in a society that thinks there's something out of order with you, that you're not in tune with your maker if you have a mental health problem. For all of the intelligence this nation claims, people don't recognize the fact it's just another kind of illness, a kind of broken body that has to be repaired, or psyche or nervous system. And who's to say what it is precipitated this? He was still a relatively young man. Nevertheless, he couldn't deal with his problems, was somewhat of a marksman himself, and he did badly to people who, if you can say the word deserved, didn't deserve this. A father and son, all the different people who were there. It was terrible. Was it avoidable? Of course it was. If they took the signs of his suffering this summer and acted upon it, maybe committed him until they could figure out what to do for him, none of these people would be dead, nor would he be. But our society talks about things all the time, but doesn't do anything about them. That's a pretty sorry way to progress in our society. So, hi, look at this. We got a whole army out here. Take care. So, what should have happened? What should have happened is plain. I think I mentioned once before, or more than that perhaps, because it was an important period for me, that I sat as a special justice in civil commitment cases. And there were three kinds of cases. People who got drunk and perhaps were alcoholics, but they would generally be released. Then we had two classes, in my opinion, of mental health problems. And it usually involves schizophrenia, having delusions and so forth. And some of those patients or respondents, well, they could respond to medicine. And from the time that they came in to the hospital to the time I saw them, 48 hours afterwards as a justice, they were fine in the sense that they were functioning and there weren't manifestations of the delusions that captured them. But the saddest cases of all were those that no medication, no treatment could help. And there was overall the same thing that resulted in mental care facilities being closed down many years ago. And it was what it cost. Did these people have insurance? And so I don't know what any of those elements are in the case of the late Robert Card, whose name will live in infamy rather than having been treated as a patient with serious mental problems. No effort, as far as we know right now, has been made to help him with his problems. No effort was made to separate him from guns, and we don't know what the content was of his statements. But he was speaking to voices, and I may have mentioned before, in one of the cases I considered, and these are all public record, by the way, but I don't remember the name of the lady, she had conversations with God, and I had conversations with her about those conversations. And I asked her basically, because she didn't want to take her medicine, if I told her to take the medicine, would she do it? And she said, yes. I said, will you work out with the doctor for the best possible medication? Yes. And I said, but what about what God is telling you to do? Oh, because you've told me to do it, I will do it. Charming lady appeared not to have any deficit in terms of collegiality, being forthcoming, and she had driven a school bus for many years, so she was active in the community and well considered. So we have politicians who all the time telling us everything's going to be okay, but then they do nothing to take care of it. And on two levels, the problem with guns is A, that we give lip service to caring about mental health, but do nothing about it. We give lip service to preventing the next attack, but the answer is to give a 10-year-old an AR-15 or a teacher a PPK, or, it's not realistic. And the element of surprise in so many areas of life is the most treacherous and dangerous when it comes to guns. When you have an AR-15, you can't get your gun out, take off the safety, check that it's loaded, point it, you're already dead. So this is one of the abiding problems that we have. Another one, which relates to our health, if you will, is that in the, we claim, richest nation in the world, and I don't know if that's true in the Middle East, but that's what we say, we have 44.2 million people who are food insecure, which is another way to say hungry. And here's the other startling statistic, that it went up 10.3 million people in a single year. Where does that come from? The Washington Post has had a series that I find distressing, and it's about Lunchables for the kids. We're feeding the kids processed junk food, and the powers that be are smoothing the path for these companies to receive this great market among school children, but at the expense of the health of these school children. Doritos and taco meat, salsa cheese on cookies is not a healthy lunch. But they have YouTubes encouraging kids to believe otherwise. So the kids think that they're eating tasty food laden down with salt and fat and sugar, when in fact their entire health is being compromised, and when obesity is on the climb. And once again, it's the politicians smoothing the path for corporate people, talking about helping children, when instead compromising them. And what else is happening? What else is happening is that more people are ill, and at younger ages. And more people are dying at younger ages. In fact, there's a story about a person who, runs, I guess you could call it a business, burying people in a small community. And he's amazed at how many younger people are dying. Well, we don't take care of ourselves. Now, in my own case, we try to do the best we can, and you don't know what errors you've committed in your life until they visit you 20 years later. But because I was interested in sports and took a step back because I thought someday I'd run in politics, I had a very straight younger life, but not all my friends did. And it was the 60s. But athletics and other things sort of helped me. Although in our Irish family, a lot of butter on Wonder Bread and things that one shouldn't eat. So over the years, I became a vegan/vegetarian, occasionally offending the pure way. And it seems to have taken hold in me and held me in good stead. So I'm not saying everybody else should be, but it's pretty clear that if you laden your diet with these things and exercise a little bit and do what you can even if you're ill, it makes a big difference to the life that you have and how long it may be. You may have heard me talk about the golden years, and I forgive me if I repeat myself, but I think it's worth saying. I would ask doctors whatever happened to that tree-lined avenue with tiny animals and wonderful golden sunshine, the golden years. And I never got an answer through my yearly checkup as to where that was. And finally, one Irish doctor one day said to me, he said, "Hey, John, you're alive." And I thought, that's it. The people who die in their 40s and 50s, it's a shame and a loss. And not just because of shootings, it just happens. And it's happening for a variety of reasons, some of which are controllable. But the golden years are the extra years we get that somebody else didn't get. And we honor them by how we live our lives. And that's not an easy business. And for some people, it doesn't seem to make any sense. But they should realize that if you live that kind of a life, you're more comfortable in that life. That you don't break your nervous system. You may not break your bones and so forth. You may not discover problems with your heart and your lungs and all the things in this walking meat that we inhabit that can go wrong. So the story of our health is not always guided by examples of people we should mimic. And my various coaches were overweight smokers. One I thought was an alcoholic. Very good people who treated us well. Lastly, I'd like to make a short visit with a rabbi who's a longtime friend of mine. And he and I have these conversations about what's going on. And this is a particularly painful time for him. He's a rabbi in Long Island. And he was finding that by having open discussions about it, he, a rabbi, might be considered an anti-Semite. Isn't that bizarre? Because any suggestion of the two-state solution to some is a betrayal of Israel. And I've known this man for some time, and that's not his case. It's a little bit like, out of respect, you don't say the N-word because of how devastating it is to someone who immediately conjures up all the terrible things that happen based on race. And so it's like a word, a code, among persons of color, either to joke about it or say it seriously in criticism and so forth. I think the same thing can be said about the ever-present sense of the Holocaust and the ongoing discrimination, anti-Semitism, that sort of brings that to the fore. So a person who can't lay claim to it because either they were married to somebody who was Jewish or know people or commiserate with it, just like racism, it's not that you're excluded from the debate, but you have to tread very carefully not to be offensive. And so you can't say to some people that Netanyahu is using this struggle to avoid going to prison and the Hamas are as crazy as bedbugs. You have to be careful how you discuss these things. And I do think that the Biden administration is doing the right thing, trying to slow down the violence so that peace has a chance. These are difficult times. We have to use our minds to deal with these difficult times. This week I've had the opportunity to do a lot of writing and into the late hours. And the reason I'm able to do the walk and talk today is I finished my last assignment at 10:30 a.m. last night, forwarding a brief and exhibits to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. And among others, Joseph Campbell talks about our warrior nature. And so to do a project like that, or raise a child, or do something important to family or in your professional life, takes a resolve that you can only commit if you already care deeply about what you're doing or you're concerned about the objective. That's what we have to do about our government and our state of affairs. For doing nothing in these various ways, war, health, politics, is not acceptable because it can get worse. And it will if we do nothing. And many people have been awakened and are in the struggle. We have to support them by our words, if no other way. If they're candidates, we should support them. But we should be disciplined to support only those that are good for us. A friend doesn't hurt another friend. So if a Democrat hurts me, well, then that Democrat is not deserving of my vote. I have no hesitation saying I will not vote for any Republican under any circumstance, because they don't have degrees of freedom to do what's right. They don't seem to care to do what's right, and that's not acceptable. So, in the next several days, I'll be told how much faster and longer I may walk and what I may lift and so forth. And outside of a Tylenol I took today, knock on wood, my own health condition seems to be okay. We never know until I guess we fall down. I haven't had that experience, but it's something that we all know we face at some age, young or old. So I'm glad to join you in the sunshine on this beautiful day, and we're getting closer to my cathedral of trees. All the best. Bye-bye.